Welcome to Global Dispatches, a podcast about foreign policy and world affairs. I'm your host, Mark Leon Goldberg, editor of UN Dispatch. And in this show, we discuss topical global issues, have conversations with foreign affairs thought leaders and newsmakers, and give you the context you need to understand the world today. Go to globaldispatchespodcast.com to learn more. And now on with the show. In rural Ethiopia, women are more likely than men to collect firewood and cook over stoves that emit harmful smoke. Meanwhile, men are more likely than women to control how household income is spent. Accordingly, men are less likely than women to purchase improved cooking stoves that emits fewer pollutants while cooking. This is the case in rural Ethiopia and also across rural communities throughout much of the developing world. My guest today, Dr. Sied Hassan, sought to dig deeper into this phenomenon. He designed what I find to be a truly inventive field experiment to uncover the willingness of men versus the willingness of women to pay for an improved cookstove. Dr. Sied Hassan is a research fellow at the Ethiopian Policy Studies Institute, a think tank in Ethiopia, and he discusses his experiment and the very big policy implications of his findings. We also discuss a related experiment in which he tested various methods to increase the willingness of rural households to pay for solar lighting. Today's episode is part of a series of episodes that showcase the research and work of the Sustainable Energy Transitions Initiative, SETI. SETI is an interdisciplinary global collaborative that aims to foster research on energy access and energy transitions in low and middle-income countries. Currently, SETI is housed at Duke University, where it is led by professors Subrendu Patnaik and Mark Juland. To learn more about SETI, follow them on Twitter at SETI Energy. And you can find all the episodes as part of this series on globaldispatchespodcast.com. And now here is my conversation with Dr. Sied Hassan, whom I caught up with from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The main point that I was interested in finding out in that paper was in Ethiopia or also in many low-income countries. Women are mainly responsible for household chores, in particular on collection of firewood, cooking and baking. And they are mainly also the ones who are exposed to indoor air pollutions and also in other dangers in collecting fireworks. So if we introduce a technology that reduces their time and also that reduces emission, and women will be the ones who will be greatly benefited. But men in many of the rural areas of least developing country, in particular in Ethiopia, they are not responsible for cooking. They are not mainly responsible for fuel collection. In particular, when we see the cooking part, the man doesn't care how the food is cooked. The man only cares whether the food is cooked or not. So the process of cooking is responsible for the women. So if we empower the woman in, like women empowerment in general is good not only for energy technologies, but also for child development or overall household developments. But in particular for the energy part in rural area, we know the improved stoves or any improved technology from the kitchen side that reduces the smoke and that reduces the fuel collection time. It is called we can call it the woman item. So the man, I would say, cares less likely to this technology.
And so women are the ones who are cooking.
Yes.
They're the ones most impacted by harmful indoor air pollution emitted by unimproved, dirty, burning cook stoves.
Yes.
So can you describe how you set up what I found to be a rather ingenious field experiment to test how to market or promote women's adoption of these cook stoves. Just describe your experiment for me.
Yeah, in rural area, it's the man who usually the man is by default the head of the household, who controls the household income. That's the main setup. So if the household head controls the household income, then it's less likely that the household head will invest on a commodity that is less interested to him. He will invest more likely either to a common household item like TV or light bulb or to an item which he thinks will be his own job or activity like farming and other activities. So the household head or the household income will have less chance to be invested in this improved stove because this improved stove is assumed to be the woman commodity. So this is the main assumption that I had. And then in order to avoid this, okay, if we create an experiment where the woman will have her own income, the husband will have his own income, and also both husband and wife will have also their joint income. So can we prove this, the assumption or the hypothesis I set up? So now we come to the experiment setup. Okay, let's design an experiment where the woman will generate we call it her income, the husband his income, and both will generate income. We call it this household income. So I'm expecting that the joint income, the impact of the joint income and the household income are more or less similar, while the wife's income will have greater impact. So we created in that experiment, we created like a job. It's called it's a weeding of in a farm, in a agricultural extension farm. So we let them to work, the wife individually, the husband individually, and some households also through random selection to work jointly. And then once they generated these incomes, individual incomes and joint incomes, we also create a design where the wife makes individual decision, the husband makes like different households. Also, where the husband is selected to make an individual decision, some households to make a joint decision. So this is our experiment design. Do you think Yeah.
And so basically, you pay these different control groups for manual labor,
Yes.
and then you present them with a choice that they can make regarding the potential purchase of an improved cook stove after giving them some information.
Yes.
So what did you find in terms of the difference between how women who had just received this income from their manual labor decide to spend it versus men versus the combined household income?
So what I find is, in general, first, women who the women individual preference is completely different from either the joint preference or the husband preference. So women are more willing to pay for the women with individual income are more willing to pay, who are deciding also individually are willing to pay to buy the improved stove than men who get their own income and also make the individual decision. And also I find the joint decision is close to the husband decision than to the wife's decision.
And one thing I found really interesting about this is how you measured willingness to pay. You basically had them write an amount of money that they would be willing to spend on the cook stove, right?
Yes.
And then they you randomly selected that.
Yes.
Can you just describe that aspect of the experiment? Because that to me is just absolutely fascinating.
Yes. Okay. With the permission from the regional authorities, because in rural area in Ethiopia the education level is very low, so we ask them to write their willingness to pay. that will be challenging. So we printed a clear copy of the monies for the experiment in different notes, 10, 20, according to the country's number of notes. A note with 5, a note with 10, 50, and 100. We prepared these notes. And then there is one method which is called, probably it's more technical, it's called the Baker-Debrot-Marshak method. For non-technical person, what it's like, it's a bidding method. You just bid. And this bidding method is like, you ask them how much they are willing to pay for this item. But there are two conditions for this one that you have to inform them. The willingness to pay that you declare, there will be random willingness to pay in a pocket. A random number will be picked. That number could be greater than the stated willingness to pay or less than the stated willingness to pay. If the willingness, the picked up price is greater than their stated willingness to pay, then this means they are not willing to buy. So we will tell them, even if they are willing to buy, they will not be allowed to buy this stove, even if,
because it's more than what they said that they would be willing to pay.
Yes, but if they regret, we will not allow them, because we want to tell us their true willingness to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the mechanism. But if it is less than the price, then this means they are willing to pay. Then we ask them, they can buy.
Mm-hmm. And so what did you find out? What were your results from this?
Yeah, as I stated earlier, our results implies that women who are making decision individually, who are empowered with income, are more willing to pay for this improved stove than women who are either making jointly with the husband or the husband's decision. So which means women, if we empower women, then we will get this improved stove in the kitchen of women, in the kitchen of rural households. That's the conclusion.
And so, still in this region and throughout much of Ethiopia, the prevalence of improved cook stoves is still relatively low.
Very low.
And very low.
Yeah.
And the harm for dirty burning cook stoves falls mainly to women, as you said earlier. And so it would, I guess, one sort of obvious policy implication from your research is that methods to empower women and give them some degree of financial independence will result in a greater demand for improved cook stoves. Is that fair?
Yes. And this is, when you see this in urban area, usually women in urban area are empowered because they can generate income, they can be employed, more or less they have some income generation mechanism. So they don't wait for the husband to ask for money, because they can take some part of their monthly salary, they can buy it, and they can have some sort of decision power within their income. So I think creating job opportunities for rural women could help to empower and make this technology available.
You've also conducted a related study on lighting preferences.
Yes.
Can you just sort of describe what were you trying to learn with that study?
Yeah, the main point that we want to study in lighting is regarding two policies. One, the pricing policy, and then the non-pricing policy. There are two ways. There could be many ways, but we are focusing on the pricing and the non-pricing or soft policies to promote the diffusion of solar in Ethiopia, and still in rural Ethiopia. So when we mean by pricing policy, we are in particular referring to subsidy, not taxes. Subsidy means, I hope this term is obvious, because it's common in many areas about subsidies. So what we mean is, because the demand for this technology, still rural households, they understand this technology. They somehow probably, we can say, the solar, but the demand is still low. So how do we promote this demand for solar lanterns in rural area, in a remote and uneducated rural areas? So there are two ways. One is to because if they feel it's expensive, then we have to provide some subsidy. If they don't, this is one policy, so provision of subsidy, which is common. Usually donors provide subsidies for this solar. So the other way is the soft policy, the non-monetary policy, which is called non-price policy, which is called the information. We call it information. So if we provide full information about this solar, the benefits of solar in a full package, then probably this might help. So we were looking at one, whether the price policy is better than the information policy or whether the combined effect is policy. So we have
Well, that's interesting. So I mean, basically, there are two ways of increasing demand for
yes,
solar lighting.
yes,
One is just to provide a direct subsidy to households
yes,
to let them purchase it. The other is to, explain the benefits
yes,
of solar lighting and create the demand that way without offering them a subsidy.
yes.
And you're trying to figure out which one works better, or is
Yeah,
that right?
also some households with a combination of price and subsidy. Okay, so what is important is the subsidy alone is not enough. What we find is provide provision of subsidy and information are important in promoting the solar in a rural area where income is low, where information is not provided enough.
So that's interesting. So it's not just money that makes the difference.
Yes,
You
yes,
actually have to sort of convince people that
yes.
with money plus information, you should make this purchase
Yeah, it's
of the
not
solar
only also
energy.
information. It's not also convincing, but also providing some incentive to buy.
Well, that's interesting. Like, I mean, thinking about your two studies on cook stoves and on solar lighting in comparison to each other, why are preferences around electricity different than those around, say, improved cook stoves?
I would say electricity is a common commodity in the household, and the husband could value also the electricity because the the lamp with kerosene is different from the light from electricity. So the household will value it. But with cook stove, it's normally to be believed as a woman commodity. So the husband is less interested. There is more interest from both husband and wife in electricity than in improved stoves. So probably promotion of sometimes we can combine, like if the household can buy solar or some commodity, then you need to make it like kind of a package where the husband is more interested, like complementary package. That is
That's
some
interesting.
Yeah, that's something that I see.
So that's interesting. So that's maybe a potential really important policy
Yeah,
recommendation from these two papers is that, as you said, because lighting is considered a common household good, not that exclusively that benefits the woman, like
yeah,
a cleaner burning cook stove, the man who is head of household is more willing to invest their income into it. So if you can combine like a sort of a clean energy package
yes,
to rural households that includes solar lighting and improved cook stoves, you might get a better rate of uptake.
yes, yes.
Is the government or any governments in Africa or Ethiopia specifically sort of thinking through the issues that way with that specific gender lens?
Say it again.
So, I mean, so are there any entities that are taking up that implication that are trying to sell these combined packages to rural households?
The gender issue is common. They understand it, but there is a less. I would say we have presented our work in so many workshops. We have invited NGOs and government officials to consider our works. But I would say up to now, I would say less NGOs and less people are considering this option. But probably maybe we need to discuss more and promote more this to the local NGOs and the policymakers.
Well, this podcast is a good opportunity to do that. I think that's interesting. I mean, that's just like, that's kind of the purpose of this podcast, is to get these kind of ideas out there. And to be honest, I've been around clean cookstoves and those issues for a long time, having kind of been a reporter covering global development. But I've never heard of this idea of combining the clean cookstove and the solar lighting, clean electricity demand in order to sort of satisfy the sort of gender sensitivities in certain areas. So that's really interesting to me.
Well,
finally, this episode is being produced in partnership with SETI. Can you just discuss briefly your participation with SETI and how it's helped you in your work?
Yeah, the SETI is established with I think through cooperation between the Ethiopia EFD team, I think Chile, Costa Rica, and Duke. I'm not sure about Costa Rica, but I know Ethiopia is part of in the initial establishment of SETI. But I find SETI is more interesting because it takes the energy issue more boldly, and it tries to reach many scholars who have worked on energy previously in middle and least developed countries, and it creates an opportunity for a network with people. And also in some of the workshops, they invite some policymakers from industries, like these non-academicians. So it was helpful and beneficial. I have been participated in many of the SETI meetings. I was actually I would have given the gold membership. I have missed only once.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think I would like to make a statement on SETI. SETI is a very important platform. So it would be good if programs like SETI have been getting more resource to go beyond the current setup. Like now, it's like an initiative. If it becomes like an institute, it would be great. It will have a greater impact than the current work.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Sied.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to Dr. Sied Hassan and to the great folks at the Sustainable Energy Transitions Initiative. This has been a great series. And again, you can access other episodes as part of this series by visiting globaldispatchespodcast.com. All right. See you next time. Bye.